Welcome back to the Scones Tomes Book Club, your monthly invitation to step into the amazing world of books, reading, and all things cozy. I'm your host, Librarian Anna, and I am so thankful that you're spending a piece of your day with me. For the month of July, we've been reading The Last Mrs. Parrish by Liv Constantine, and I cannot wait to jump into our discussion today. But first, I would love to ask you for your help in sharing this podcast with as many people as possible. By leaving a rating or review on Apple Podcasts, subscribing wherever you get your podcasts, or just sharing the podcast with your friends over social media. You can directly help the algorithm promote the podcast to more listeners. You can also support the podcast by reading the blog over at thelibrariananna.wordpress.com, joining our Patreon community, or by setting up a one-time or monthly payment over on anchor.com/Scones Tomes Book Club. Now, you know the drill. Go grab your cup of cozy, and we'll get right into it after we hear from today's sponsor.
Hey friends, the Scones Tomes Book Club is brought to you by Anchor. Anchor is an all-in-one podcaster's dream. It's a free platform that allows you to create, record, edit, and distribute your podcast all in one place. And as a bonus, it also allows you to monetize your content with sponsorships and ad placement. So why not start today? Get started with your own podcast over at anchor.fm or on the Anchor app available on iOS and Android. What are you waiting for?
All right, friends, I do want to start off this episode by apologizing if I sound a bit different on this month's recording. Illness has been running rampant through my house over the last few weeks, and I managed to catch something that led to me getting laryngitis. My voice still hasn't quite fully recovered. So if I sound super off, that's probably why. But okay, let's get into The Last Mrs. Parrish. Where does one even begin with this book? Like, honestly, what even is this? To begin with, I kind of hate that I went into this book blind, because there are so many content warnings that my head is spinning trying to list them all. Last Mrs. Parrish is an adult domestic psychological thriller that earned an MPAA rating of NC-17 for manipulation, domestic abuse, marital rape, cheating, on-page sex scenes, gun violence, emotional abuse, verbal abuse. Don't say it's children, and that's not even all of them. It deals with some of the worst characters I've had the displeasure of reading, and yet the writing style and plotline kept me intrigued enough to keep going. I ended up giving this book a 3 out of 5 stars and a 4.86 call pile rating, just because of the author's writing style and how much I enjoyed the ending. But this is just one of those books that focuses on how horrible people are, and I kind of wish I hadn't read it.
Dear Steerlings, this is your official warning that the rest of this podcast is dark and full of spoilers. If you have not read this month's pick and would prefer not to get spoiled for events that happen in the novel, please take this as your permission slip to turn the episode off and come back after you've finished.
I don't really have a down the rabbit hole segment for this book other than to mention that Liv Constantine is the pen name for two sisters, Lynn and Valerie Constantine, who wrote this book together over the internet and have since put out 3 more domestic thriller novels, as well as a prequel novella to The Last Mrs. Parrish. I love when your siblings write together, and it reminds me a lot of the many, many hours going back and forth with my sister over forum RPGs growing up. Except, these guys are actually getting published. So, like I said, they have 3 more domestic thriller novels, so if you love this one, maybe go check out theirs. So let's get into format and structure. So The Last Mrs. Parrish is told in 3 parts from 2 different point of views. I found this to be an interesting choice because it's not something I've read a lot of in domestic thrillers. In the handful that I've read, the story is almost always one-sided. So when we suddenly flipped perspectives in part 2, I was a little thrown off, but in a good way. There are some reviews that have been saying that The Last Mrs. Parrish is considered a feminist novel, and I can't quite get on board with that. The authors have made very specific choice in building the characters from negative stereotypes. So, Amber, our primary narrator, is a generally terrible person, fitting very well into our stereotypical view of what a homewrecker is. While Daphne, at least in the first half, fits perfectly into our rich, perfect princess trope. This doesn't even mention the side characters in the book, which really had no depth to them either. Now, I will say that while this doesn't really work for me personally as a reader, mostly because I'm not a fan of unredeemable characters, it does work in the context of this novel because you really start to believe Amber's views of the other characters. So then when you suddenly jump into Daphne's point of view in part 2, it's much more shocking when you learn just how different everything is from what you've been led to believe. Okay, let's chat about Amber. I kind of already mentioned this, but she is supposed to be the quintessential terrible homewrecker character. But honestly, she's worse than that. She is capital H horrible, and honestly, I almost chucked this book across the room because I hated reading from her perspective just so much. We follow her POV for more than half of the book, and we're supposed to believe that she is from severe poverty, which is what is leading her to go through such lengths to become rich. But here's the thing. From the few descriptions of her childhood that we've gotten, it really doesn't sound as bad as she's making it out to be. Sure, her parents weren't rich. The kids had to help out at the store, but they consistently had food on the table, a stable roof over their head, and she had a family who loved her. Yes, it wasn't living in a mansion in New York, but it wasn't the poverty that her grandparents were dealing with, and it's not the poverty of a third world country either. So instead of getting sympathy from me, it honestly just made me feel like she was an awful person who didn't want to legitimately earn her way into a different life. Instead, she wanted to take it from other people by any means necessary. Through the entire first part, we're supposed to just go along with Amber's scheming and listen to her waxing on and on and on about how none of the rich women in Daphne's circle deserves their wealth and status. And I mean, sure, she has some good points, but the way she just goes on and on and on is extremely annoying and pretty pathetic. But the focus of her wrath is Daphne, who Amber believes is rich, spoiled, and naive. So when we finally switch to Daphne's perspective in part 2, it almost seems impossible that she's not as weak as Amber has made her out to be. At the same time, Daphne's story is even more shocking after being stuck in Amber's head for so long. I wouldn't say it works for me as a reader, but it definitely made me more satisfied at the very end of the novel. So while I never thought that Amber was justified in what she was doing, I could definitely relate to the frustration she had seeing other people being able to do the things or have the stuff that she wanted. It is hard to have dreams and to have to work harder to achieve them than what it seems other people have to do. At the same time, it doesn't justify falling into a life of crime. The primary themes of this novel revolve around the ideas that things are not always what they seem, and seeing people finally get what they deserve. Now, while I think that this novel was an interesting exploration of these themes, I do not agree with the idea that Amber got what she deserved, at all. I hate Amber with a burning passion, but no one deserves to be abused in any way, shape, or form, even an abuser. So the fact that this book seems to be hinting that Amber ending up with Jackson is getting what she deserves just really rubs me the wrong way. Now, Jackson and Amber going to jail and Daphne getting to start over with her family in another state. Now, that's justice. Alright, friends. That's all I really have to say on The Last Mrs. Parrish by Liv Constantine for now. So let's jump on over to this month's Adventurer's Flight. If you enjoyed this book, I would recommend picking up Anything Else by Liv Constantine, Behind Her Eyes by Sarah Pembroke, An Anonymous Girl by Greer Hendricks, and The Wrong Family by Taryn Fisher. All of the books are by masters of domestic thrillers and play with some of the same tropes and themes of The Last Mrs. Parrish, and I'll have links to all of them in the description box. So, for the month of August, we'll be picking up The Huntress by Kate Quinn. Kate Quinn is one of those historical fiction authors that basically breaks all of the library holds lists every time she has a new book out, so she's been on my radar for quite a while. While I am a little nervous about picking this one up because it is a World War II book, and usually World War II books are not my favorite, it's about a Nazi hunter, and it just sounds like quite the adventure. So thank you again for spending your day with me, and I hope to see you back here on August 29th for our chat about The Huntress. So share pictures of you listening to the podcast or reading along with the hashtag Scones Tomes Book Club, and let's get connected, okay? Until next time, stay cozy.